For 32 years, it was the world's longest, busiest, and most peaceful commercial border, an entire era of tariff-free commerce between the United States and Canada that defined a continent. But in the highest echelons of power, a decision was made to bring that era to an end. The nature of the battlefield had changed. And then came the ultimatum, delivered on live television by America's top trade negotiator. This wasn't a proposal, you see. It was a declaration. The price for a continued partnership was, in effect, unconditional surrender. The end of free trade was no longer just a threat. It was now official United States policy. So the first phase of this operation was clear. The strategy was to overwhelm the opponent with a set of demands that were completely non-negotiable, demands designed to fundamentally rewrite the economic rules for all of North America. And the terms were explicit. Permanent tariffs would be baked into any new deal. Canada's historically protected markets, we're talking dairy, wine, and spirits, were to be opened up. Government contracts, once again accessible to American firms. And, maybe most importantly, stricter U.S. content rules would be enforced, effectively building a new economic wall on the continent. Now, to underscore the seriousness of this campaign, the U.S. Trade Representative actually pointed to the closure of an Ontario auto plant as proof that the strategy was working. The loss of Canadian manufacturing jobs wasn't viewed as collateral damage. No, it was considered a desired outcome, a victory to be celebrated publicly. Washington expected a quick capitulation. What they got instead was something else entirely, a strategic response executed with incredible precision and speed. It was, in effect, a classic flanking maneuver, but on a global scale. You really have to appreciate the contrast in tactics here. While the United States was broadcasting its demands for the whole world to see, Canada's response wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a counter-threat. It was simply a flight manifest, a quiet, calculated deployment of its most senior assets to entirely new theaters of operation. And this was no ordinary trade delegation. You could call it an asymmetric response team. You had the ministers of defense, foreign affairs, and finance, joined by key provincial leaders and a special advisor on security. This was a multi-domain force designed to execute a single, nonpartisan national strategy, using trade diversification as a weapon of statecraft. The objective for the Canadians wasn't to confront the American blockade head-on. The plan was to make it irrelevant. And the strategy to do that? Establish new, resilient supply lines and strategic partnerships across the Indo-Pacific, far beyond Washington's immediate sphere of influence. The mission targeted 3 specific nations, which together would unlock access to a market of over 2 billion people. The scale of this pivot was just immense. It signaled a fundamental realignment of Canada's economic gravity, moving it away from its traditional partner. First stop, India, the fastest-growing major economy on the planet. The objective was to kickstart a comprehensive economic partnership to more than double the bilateral trade and lock in new agreements in really critical sectors like energy, uranium, and artificial intelligence. From there, the mission moved on to Australia. And here, the diplomatic terrain was, well, already prepared. A full 81% of the Australian population already disagreed with the American tariff policy. That created a very receptive audience for new strategic alignment. And that alignment was confirmed at the absolute highest level. Australia's Prime Minister publicly endorsed the Canadian vision. This sent a clear signal to the world that an alternative to the US-centric trade system wasn't just possible, it was actively being built. The final destination on this strategic tour was Japan. With $36.4 billion in annual trade, Japan was set to be the anchor of this new Indo-Pacific alliance. Every single deal signed here, from clean energy to food security, would help build an economic fortress that stood independent of American approval. Now, this entire Canadian counteroffensive was designed to have direct and severe consequences for Washington's opening move. It was engineered to expose critical vulnerabilities in the American economic battle plan. You see, the American justification for all these new rules was to stop what they called screwdriver operations, the idea that goods were just being minimally processed in Canada to get around U.S. tariffs. But Canada's new alliances created a strategic bypass. They began forging supply chains for the technologies of the next century that didn't need to pass through Washington's gate at all. And the U.S. was not immune to the blowback. The $100 billion auto trade, America's agricultural exports, its defense industry, they were all now exposed. Canada had already started redirecting 70% of its military procurement away from U.S. firms, and this mission was set to build even more defense partnerships in Asia. And this wasn't just a theory. This shift was already happening. The trade data confirmed it. Canadian businesses had already recovered nearly $11 billion of the $18.5 billion in lost U.S. exports, simply by rerouting their goods to 27 other countries. They weren't waiting for negotiations, they were building the alternative in real time. So, with these new alliances forged and supply chains rerouted, all the pieces were set for a confrontation. A new global battlefield was taking shape, one where the old rules of leverage no longer applied. The timeline here is absolutely critical. In late July, two things happen. The primary American tariff weapon, its authority under Section 122, expires. And in that very same week, the official review of the Continental Trade Agreement begins. This means Canadian negotiators will walk into that room not as supplicants asking for a deal, but as the architects of a new global trade network they built while Washington was busy focusing on its wall. When you boil it all down, the United States demanded surrender and tried to build an economic fortress. Canada responded not by attacking the fortress, but by charting entirely new routes across the globe. And so the fundamental strategic question remains. In modern economic warfare, when the only road forward is blocked, who wins? The one who builds the wall or the one who builds new bridges?